Kalimera, and welcome to Stupid Ancient History, Stupid A Level Greeks. Sadly, the sun is not shining, I am wearing a toga, and this short little video is going to be an introduction to the videos that will go along with relations between Greek and non-Greek states. So the first thing to mention in this overview video is what these are. These short videos are by no means a replacement for careful analysis and reading of the original source material that you are given to study. The whole point of these videos is to give you a broad overview, the narrative overview, as it were, of what happens throughout the duration of this course, throughout the 5th century BC in Greece. And there is a lot going on, so this is why it's going to be useful. There will be some evaluation, there will be some discussion of key things, significance and analysis, but the main purpose is that to help you with the understanding with the narrative. The other thing we should really point out when we talk about the introduction to this course is what the term means, Greeks and non-Greeks. Throughout the period that we're looking at, the Greeks and non-Greeks ultimately means the Greek world and, of course, the Persians. So throughout, from 500 BC to 403 BC, the main contenders in the world that we're looking at are the various different Greek city-states and the Persians. The next thing we should really talk about in this introduction then is who and where were the Greeks. Now, the first problem you're going to come across is that there is, at this period in history, there is no such thing as the Greeks. Yes, there are a bunch of people who all speak Greek, who are arguably ethnically Greek, but they do not see themselves as a unified people. Ultimately, when we talk about the Greeks, we talk in this period about a series of squabbling, unhappy individual city-states who do not get on with each other at all. So if you look at the map on the screen, obviously in the middle we've got what is geographically Greece. This is obviously the main focus of where we're going to look at. This is where you will find the majority of the Greeks. However, where we start our course in 500 BC, if you look to the right hand side in the Persian Empire in Asia Minor, what is now modern day Turkey, you have a whole series of Greek states on the Ionian coast who are technically part of the Persian Empire, but again identify as ethnically Greek. And they take up this entire coastline. They play quite a significant part in the story that unfolds. Also on the map you'll see we've got islands like Crete particularly, and all the Cycladian islands between Persian Empire and Greece that you can't see on this map because it's tiny. The more observant of you as well will have seen that on the left hand side there is the southern tip of Italy and Sicily. By 500 BC the Greeks had pretty much spread as far as their boats could carry them, and this did involve Sicily and southern Italy, and these places will play a relatively important part in the story later on. So when we talk about the Greeks, remember there are no such thing as Greeks. Which Greeks are we talking about and where are they? And the tip is they're not all in Greece. So now we've established who and where the Greeks are, we need to look at when. And the course ultimately looks at, like I said, the 5th century BCE in Greece. This is kind of the classical era, or the golden era of Greece. This is when most stuff's happening. And we broadly start around 500 BC. I know the course says not 500 BC, but you need to understand the events that happen to know what happens next. And it's a busy 100 years, to be honest. There's a lot going on, but you can chunk it into 3 big lumps. So the first big lump that we need to look at are the Persian Wars in 490 and 480 BC. This is when the Persians, funnily enough, come and attack Greece. And spoilers, it doesn't go very well for them. Then there's this fiddly bit in the middle from about 478 up to 440. We'll look at this in a bit more detail. There's a lot going on. There's a bit of a war. There's a lot of squabbles. But there's this fiddly bit in the middle. And then finally, from 431 to the end of the century, you have the Second Peloponnesian Wars, where the Greeks are constantly fighting each other, although not very successfully. So a quick timeline would start with Persian Wars, fiddly middle bit, and end with Peloponnesian Wars. And of course, last but not least, we should talk about, this is ancient history after all, the sources that you will need to look at for this course. For this part of the course, there are two main sources that you will look at. They are quite hefty beasts, but that's not to worry about. This is an A level after all. The first one is everyone's favourite rambling guy, Herodotus. Herodotus covers the first part of the century. He covers the Persian Wars and the events building up to it. When Herodotus' narrative finishes in about 479 at the Siege of Sestos, we turn to a second author, Thucydides. He writes the history of the Peloponnesian Wars. It's not just the history of the Peloponnesian Wars, it covers the large part of the century, looking at why the Peloponnesian Wars started and what happened. Both of these two are contemporaries to the time they are writing. So Herodotus is writing shortly after the Persian Wars. Certainly he is old enough to have lived through it, even as a small child. And he has access to a lot of contemporary sources. Thucydides, similarly, Thucydides actually is even more of a contemporary because he is writing during the Peloponnesian War. And he's not just writing as a casual bystander. Thucydides, before he starts writing his history, was an Athenian general, and he was actively involved in fighting the Peloponnesian War until it didn't go great for him and he was exiled. And then he starts writing his history. So both these sources are from the period, they are contemporary, and they are very detailed. These are our main and most detailed surviving sources. There are other sources that we will look at though. We'd be amiss when we looked at the period and some of the individuals, particularly if we didn't look at Plutarch, particularly for the likes of Themistocles, Pericles, Cimon and Aristides. Plutarch is obviously a great place to start. But again, given the lack of other sources, we do have to dabble into some of the drama from the period. So we will look at Aeschylus' Persians, even if it's only briefly. We will have maybe a bit more of a look at particularly the works of Aristophanes. Aristophanes was an Athenian playwright who lived throughout the period. He has some very, very choice things to say, and he is quite useful in giving us a view of the Athenians and what they thought of things. So these are the main sources that you will look at throughout the course. So that's it for this short video. It is just a quick introduction to what the hell you've got yourself in for. Hopefully this has been useful. Hopefully it clears things up. Leave us a comment below, and until next time, goodbye.